I'm going to ask Jim Geraghty right now for his prediction on the Yankees Guardians series because I'm going to be up late every night yelling. Jim, what do you think?
You're going to be in trouble, Hugh. New York will win. That's just my default answer for everything: football, baseball, everything like that. And the problem is because they're called the Guardians. They should have picked a better name. I understand.
Jim,
There was a yes.
are you a Yankees fan? You've never mentioned this before. This
I
might be
am a
like a
very
triple
casual Yankee fan.
disqualification. You are a
Yes,
Yankees fan.
unfortunately. So I grew 1986. The Mets win the World Series. Mookie Wilson, the Tuffle Shuffle, and I'm a Mets fan. A couple years later, they have the Bad Boy team where David Cohn is squirting bleach at people. Vince Coleman threw a firecracker and blinded a girl in one eye. They were the Bad Boys. They were probably all high on cocaine, and I couldn't be a Mets fan anymore. And the Yankees had my dad's all-time favorite player, Don Mattingly. So I became usually it's Jets and Mets. It's all Long Islanders or New Jerseyans who are affiliate. That's how your team affiliation starts, and usually it's a Giants Yankees fan. I became a very casual Yankee fan, and the great thing about being a Yankee fan is you don't even pay attention to the postseason. As far
Okay,
as I'm concerned,
I
the
want you to
162.
pitch. I want to pitch to you a special edition of the Editors. You and Rich Lowry against Annie McCarthy, and invite Chris Christie as your guest because he's a Mets fan too. So we have two Yankees fans and two Mets
All right.
fans. Do you think the Mets fans are rooting for the Guardians or do they want to play the Yankees?
Oh, I think I'd love a Subway series. Like these are the rivals you love to hate. By the way, Phil Klein is a Yankee fan and Charlie Cook are a Yankee fan, and they follow the sport much more than I do. So there are better people to have on a baseball focused podcast than I am.
All right. Now let me get to the question of the day. Kamala Harris. First, the setup. We have just come out of the year of dire warnings about Christian nationalism. Kim Alberta's book, John Ward's book, many think pieces about the rise of Christian nationalism. I think it's all kind of silly. But you're aware, I'm sure you're aware of that strain of writing Christian nationalism is on the rise and it's dangerous. Kamala Harris goes yesterday to the Koinonia Christian Church in Greenville, North Carolina, and gives a 10-minute sermon full of Isaiah, Micah, Galatians. It's a nice message. It's one of her better speeches on the campaign trail. Does anyone worry about the establishment of church and state going away and the rise of Christianity in the public square when she does that, Jim Geraghty?
Hugh, once you label it secular humanism, it stops being a religion, and therefore anything it does is okay. I mean, that's the mindset of a whole bunch of these people. We don't necessarily worry about left wing Christian nationalism, but look, there is an as ardent a worldview. There is as ardent a desire to implement a moral worldview. Patrick Ruffini, right before we started this conversation, was tweeting out new data showing that Trump is ahead of Harris among Catholic voters. And he said, when you make your entire campaign about abortion, it has consequences. There are a whole bunch of Catholics out there. Are probably a whole bunch of Catholics out there who are not down the line pro-lifers. And as far as I'm concerned, that's fine. This is a messy issue that makes people feel conflicted feelings, particularly on the hard cases: rape, incest, life of the mother. But there are also people who don't like the idea of abortion without limit, and they certainly don't like the idea of taxpayer funding for abortion. And when the Democratic Party, I mean, like I was just in, so I'm coming to you not from my usual background, as you've noticed. I am in Kohler,
I did
Wisconsin.
notice that.
Uh, the Bradley Impact Fund is having its conference. I'm joining them for a few days. I would say more, but apparently, if I say more, an assassin will dive out of the ceiling vent and take me out. So it's all off the record. But otherwise, really good folks. You should check them out. I was in Bucks County this past weekend. This is part of my unofficial, unplanned swing state tour for October. And Bucks County was just nonstop Trump signs. I don't know if that means Trump's going to win. And I should point out, Trump lost Bucks County in 2016 by something like a little less than 3,000 votes. Lost it by 16,000 votes in 2020. This is really important swing state suburban territory. This is where if you don't have to win it if you're a Republican, but you got to keep it close. When the abortion was on the Democrat local candidates' yard signs. That's the message. Abortion. I'll preserve a woman's right to choose. Preserve your right to an abortion. This is front and center in their messaging. And I'm sure they see it in the focus groups and they convince themselves that there are a whole bunch of people it helps. But when people say, oh, the women's vote, you notice the women's vote when it's married is much more pro-Republican, much more pro-Trump, much more traditional values. Generally, when people say the women's vote, it's shorthand for the single women's vote. And that is the demographic that goes gangbuster for abortions. Unfortunately, it's
Jim,
actually a
yesterday
minority of yeah.
in the Browns-Eagles game yesterday, there were 3 Kamala Harris ads, all of them in part about abortion, and one Trump ad, which featured Kamala Harris talking about how she is proud of providing transgender transition surgery to California inmates, including a man who was convicted of a very gruesome murder. I think that's why she's in the black church 4 weeks before the election, is that the black church is a very
We certainly
conservative church.
yeah. We can see a consistent pattern. Do you think it's coincidental that this is coming out at the same time Barack Obama is letting black men know that he's disappointed in them again? And I'm sure if you're, look, I'm not an African American man, so I don't want to, pretend I know what somebody else is feeling. But as behalf of, all other kinds of Americans, how many times has Barack Obama told us we've let him down? We haven't lived up to his expectations. He expects more from us. The disappointed dad, which I think a lot of people find condescending and a lot of people find not all that convincing or persuasive. By the way, when they point about like the argument that you're going to hear more and more in these closing weeks, that the reason she can't close the sale and the reason she is neck and neck in these 7 swing states that are going to determine everything, they're going to tell you that it's sexism. Because they can't say it's racism. If they say it's racism, like, well, this is pretty much the same electorate that elected Barack Obama twice. How are we, getting to that point? They're going to say it's sexism. And I noticed that the International Association of Firefighters has endorsed every single Democratic presidential candidate going back to Walter Mondale, except for 2. Now, Hugh, you're a smart guy. I bet you can name which 2.
George McGovern and Kamala Harris?
Good guess. No, Hillary Clinton and Kamala Harris. What do they have in
common? Oh, did they endorse George McGovern?
McGovern was back to Mondale, so McGovern would have been before that.
Oh, okay. So it's prior to that. Jim, I got to jump the line here.
84. Okay.
I want, if you'll stay during the second segment or the off-air segment, I'll play that and put it on YouTube. I got to play just a little bit of Lulu Garcia Navarro, about whom I know nothing, interviewing J.D. Vance for the New York Times for tone more than substance. Let's play cut number 5.
The reason that there is a housing crisis is that not enough houses have been built.
And that we have 25 million people who shouldn't be here.
Well, I mean, this is the thing.
I think it's both.
I know you do. I don't think that many people who look into this agree with you, but about a third of the construction workforce in this country is Hispanic. Of those, a large portion are undocumented. So how do you propose to build all the housing necessary that we need in this country by removing all the people who are working in construction?
Well, I think it's a
stop. The answer, JD eviscerates her. But Jim, how do you describe that tone?
So I'm now a semi-regularly appearing on Chris Wallace's program, and Lulu is on it. And off air, we get along. We had a very interesting agreement where she and I agreed on how the police treated the receiver for the Miami Dolphins, and the other 2 panelists, including my good friend Rayhan Salam, disagreed. And so it's kind of fascinating. So every now and then will agree. That having been said, I notice how quickly it goes from a significant portion of the workforce is undocumented immigrants to how are you going to build houses by taking away all the people who build houses? There's a little bit of like rhetorical sleight of hand here. Also, the blurring of the line between the number of people who work in construction who are Hispanic and the number of people who work in construction who are illegal immigrants. Now, I guess the term they prefer is undocumented. We have to say it's
well. The thing that got me is she said people who study this issue don't agree with you.
Yeah,
that's simply not true. I was a land use lawyer for 27 years. People agree with J.D. Vance.
I get into these arguments all the time with people, and they'll say, "I saw on the internet." I'm like, "Where?" Right? Look, I'm much more likely to be persuaded if you point me to, all throughout the Morning Jolt, everything I write for National Review, as often as I can in the Washington Post, I put in links to the direct sources, and you can evaluate them for yourself. Pick your sources very carefully. The number of times you see something on social media, Twitter, Facebook, anything like that, and it doesn't have a link for you to go and check to say who that's coming from. Like, people who I'm sure there are people who study housing who say, yes, J.D. Vance is full of nonsense. they may work for a very progressive think tank. They may work for a very progressive university. Their other study might be why Donald Trump has fangs and horns and is going to destroy the country. And if somebody says something like that, you look a little less. They seem a little less.
Yeah, talk to the
fair-minded.
National Association of Home Builders. Go to the California Builders Association. There are 1,000 different organizations that represent people who build homes, and none of them think that the ability to build homes will be compromised by a tough immigration policy. None of them. Now, Jim, I have no predictions to make about who's going to win this because I made predictions in 2016. And I was very wrong. But Donald Trump thought he was going to lose in 2016. I think it sounds like Kamala Harris thinks she's going to lose. Do you think that that's what we're hearing?
All right. So midweek of last week, I wrote a Morning Jolt entire. The vibe has shifted, and the Democratic anxiety is taking place, and they tell us not to read the comments, but there are a whole bunch. Oh, Jim, you're just reporting what you want to hear. You're believing. You're falling for spin. This is why people listen to your to where you are, Hugh, because I'll talk about things that are in today's morning newsletter that have not been sent off to the editor yet. So besides the three polls this weekend that had Trump either closing, the best one for her was ABC, where she's up 2, and Hillary was up 2 in the national popular vote, and she lost the Electoral College. You see Mika Brzezinski's monologue on Friday?
I did not.
Okay. There's this fear that Donald Trump is poised for victory. I think it's fair for Democrats to be incredibly depressed. I think it's fair for them to be discouraged, right? Politico writes, an anxious Democrat's guide to a coin toss election. Maureen Dowd says, where is the fierce urgency of beating Trump? Ezra Klein telling his readers, ignore the polls. The Pod Save America guys, who I know you're a huge fan of, they tell their episode why you shouldn't panic about the polls. Like, whether or not Democrats should panic, the tone is panic. And the reason for that, and the thing is, look, we're 3 weeks from the election. Harris has had, in their minds, a great convention. They think the Walz pick worked out great. I think you can now say it really didn't. I think he's actually kind of a spaz. You could point to the debate where I think Harris won. I think they're doing the ads they want to do. She's got 3 times as much money, 3 times as many campaign offices, 3 times as many staffers and volunteers. She should be winning by a huge margin, and she's not.
All right, I got to get one last question in, Jim.
Sure.
There are 2 Doug Emhoff stories. I have not discussed either of them on air because they're poorly sourced and they don't meet my standards. My question is not about the stories. It's about awareness of the stories in the electorate. What percentage of Americans do you think are aware of either or both of those stories?
Let's say a third, 30%, 40%, something in that window. But look, if there's anything we've learned over the years, Hugh, it's that people who work in Hollywood are endlessly respectful to women and would never allow that kind of behavior. It's totally not normal. Everyone who works in Hollywood has nothing but the most respectful, kind, and feminist attitudes when they write their.
I think it's a much higher percentage than a third, but it's very interesting. No person who depends upon sourcing things to a credible organization has talked about it, but it's everywhere. We are living in an age of unsourced allegations. Tell Lulu if she wants to know anything about housing, she can call me.
Jen Psaki told us that Doug Emhoff is the new paradigm of masculinity. That this is the role model.
I guess we'll leave it there. Jim, enjoy if you see Marin Stremecki today, tell him I said hello and have a good time in Wisconsin. Bring back news.
Quality time with the nanny. What was that song? Smack my bee up. Anyway, I don't want to
go there.
I don't want trouble. Yes,
Not going there. Thank you, Jim Geraghty.